everyone, and welcome to You'll Probably Agree. Today, we're talking about a movie that everyone loves. I mean, I don't know a single person who doesn't like that film. Of course, we're not talking about that. We're sort of putting a movie, I'd say, on trial, but we're the defense of the trial, and that is Joker Folie Deux.
I got the sneaking suspicion that we're not giving the people what they want.
Yes, I practiced on how to say the name of the movie correctly. And with us today, from Kicking the Seat podcast is Ian Simmons, and from the Chicago Tribune is Michael Phillips, and from Keeping It Real is David J. Fowley. Guys, thank you so much for coming on, and we're gonna jump straight to it. What are your guys' thoughts on the Joker? And we will start, I guess, going left to right. So we'll go top left with David.
I think I've been on record of saying before that I wasn't a huge fan of the other one, and I think that's kind of an advantage going in here. I always want to give a film the benefit of the doubt, and try something with a clean slate. And so, definitely, the fact that it was a musical was intriguing to me. The fact that Gaga was on board was intriguing to me, and I surprisingly wound up enjoying what they did, and then wound up leaving the theater with a better appreciation of the first one because I was looking at the whole story as both movies as a whole story, one story. And I think it was they were doing Phillips and his writer was doing something different for a sequel. And I guess we'll get into at some point here. What the heck is wrong with people? I don't know.
Yeah, Ian.
Yeah, I mean, I'm right there with David. I did not care for the original Joker film. I felt, it's been said a million times. It's kind of a derivative of, King of Comedy and Taxi Driver and all that, but kind of in the Batman universe, but not really. What I liked about Joker 2, which is a movie that I didn't think I wanted to see at all, is that it's sort of, to David's point, it not only improves the first film, I think, in a lot of ways, it also makes the first film unnecessary. With a couple of minor tweaks, you could just, have Joker Folie à Deux be the Joker movie, and I think it would have been a lot stronger. I like that the wider DC Comics universe connections are much subtler in this one rather than kind of being shoehorned in. I think the performances are a lot better, and I just think it says a lot more without hitting you over the head than the first one did.
Yeah, Michael, what do you think?
Well, I think in the spirit of the first film, I'm going to go at this discussion tonight with hostility and loathing, and I don't think this second one improved the first one. Although I appreciate how people can feel like they have a different, it's a different experience if you sort of look at it as not bookends because they're in every way almost total opposites in quality and in sort of a grown-up and ambiguity toward commercial comics-based filmmaking. I'm very strong on the second one. Messy and strange as it is, I don't think it had everybody making this film. The director, Todd Phillips, who has never made an interesting movie in his life until this one, I think. And certainly the stars, Joaquin Phoenix, and then secondarily cast, I mean, not secondarily, this is an important part, but cast later, Lady Gaga. I mean, Phoenix said this idea came to him in a dream, and that's exactly how it plays. It is just this flaky, insane, sort of dreamlike thing that just put the majority of comic book fans and big fans of the first one, and just sort of the half curious who did brave it, put them back on their heels. And I really admire the second one for a lot of reasons, and this doesn't sound like a good enough reason, but I'll just end with this. I love it how this second film just really flat out apologizes for some of the things that were inferred and sort of the amoral easiness and hypocrisy, frankly, of the first one. And I just like any movie that makes I like any sequel that makes the movie that made it possible the 2 hours and a half.
Yeah. I'm kind of glad that you said it sort of felt like it was capitalizing on some of the more amoral elements of the first film because Joker Folie Deux, I remember when I first saw it, I didn't know if I liked it or not, but I had to like write a review the same day. So I'm like, okay, well, it's very sophomoric to say F you to Batman fans. So I didn't like it, blah, blah, blah. And then I look back at it, I'm like, you know what? I actually kind of like this movie because the criticism that Joker got was that it was basically a film made for incels. Now, do I agree with that? Not entirely, but it took like all the violence from the first film and it shows you the repercussions for being a violent person.
That's right.
You're
That's well put. Well put.
yeah, you're
Yeah.
not going to be loved by everyone, you know. You're going to spend the rest of your life getting raped and killed in prison, which is what happens to Arthur in that movie. And when he says, and yeah, we're just gonna get into spoilers here because at this point everyone's seen it. Well, I'll make sure to put spoilers in the
Yeah.
thumbnail of the video too. Because if we just get in the conversation immediately, like, oh yeah, I got raped and killed, everyone's like,
I
well,
don't think we've changed any minds yet. So
yeah.
that's
Yeah. Maybe that'll make people want to see the movie more. You know, I always had that weird kind of thing where like if someone I remember I wouldn't go see The Sixth Sense until someone told me the ending. And I'm like, "Oh, okay, that's cool." And then I saw the movie and I just looked for the hints throughout it.
you're crazy.
Yeah.
I'm
And
I'm curious, like in this I guess in this season and this type of movie going right now, it's like, have any of you guys ever like gone back and been on a podcast where you're kind of defending a movie that got so maligned only a little over a month ago? I mean, I know we don't live in a world where, studios give a movie a chance to breathe like wine, but like, you know, I haven't done this in a while where I'm actually going back and saying, "Hey, this isn't that bad. It's actually pretty good." I can't think of a movie where I've done that before, and it's not like I think this is like the bee's knees. I just think it's much better than it's getting maligned for.
yeah,
I,
it's a oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No. Go ahead, please, Wayne.
Oh, no, well, yeah, I mean, I think people are mad because we all know why. They're taking their favorite comic book character and they literally like violate him. But the whole intention and the purpose of the movie is to not be a violent person. You know, if the world needs love, oh sweet love, then you should learn it by loving each other, not stabbing a guy in the eye and then bashing his head a million times against the wall, which was kind of like the whole reason for like the puddles scene, which I didn't get at first. At first, when I saw the puddle scene, I'm like, why is he turning into Foghorn Leghorn? And why is he messing with Puddles when Puddles is like the only person who is nice to him? And I think he did it because Arthur's a guy who does things he doesn't understand. So he thinks he can be an attorney by entertaining everyone. And that moment when Puddles isn't happy that he killed, I think the guy's name was Randall, it it didn't click with Joker, but it kind of clicked with everyone else. No, what you did was wrong. You shouldn't have killed him because he thought Gary was going to be on his side. And this is kind of like the movie that gives him a reality check. We still feel bad for him, but we also know, like, no, these actions aren't something that should be applauded. You know, this is, and I like a movie that says something different like that.
It really does. I want to jump on what something Ian said.
Yeah.
It's just this idea of like how many movies can you sort of spot as inspirations for the first Joker. That didn't bother most of the $1 billion worth of customers the first one got. I think because maybe films like Taxi Driver, it's in the past enough now that half the audience for that movie they might have seen parodies on Family Guy or some of this stuff, but they haven't seen the originals. But um, whatever, a lot of movies, riff on other movies. This one uh, is is doing a certain amount of that. But to me, this one really did feel like they were in an interesting way. They were just trying to make this strange sort of semi-musical. It's almost like, it's where the songs don't, don't, it's all sort of imaginary numbers in these increasingly sociopathic heads, right? And that's an idea that comes out of a lot of other musicals too. Chicago, the film version of Chicago, very simple idea, where you have Roxy or Velma just sort of imagining, or any other character, sort of imagining their theatrical selves in some sort of triumphant showbiz setting. It's a fine idea, works pretty well. I don't think anybody was prepared to, the fans of the first one were prepared for just how far they went with this idea. But also, what a what an admirable job they did kind of keeping this movie like it's all of a piece. You may not like it, I mean, people hate it. And a lot of critics, you know, some really way smarter than me, and some maybe whatever, just sort of missing, didn't want the movie, didn't like the movie they made, so they whatever. But I think a lot of people reacted like they were really, really personally violated by this picture, and that they had never seen a film that, especially something with songs, kind of a song-driven thing, that stayed that true to these somewhat insane intentions to get a sequel like this made. It's just amazing. I mean, I don't think the film is amazing, but I think I don't know. I found the first one really kind of slippery and kind of awful the way it plays it both ways. With like, you're going to root for this guy, but we're not, and he's clearly insane. But to see a film kind of like recommended, I guess, is amazing. That is amazing to me. That's also amazing. That, I mean, I hate to talk about money. Money's like the least interesting thing in the world. But the fact that they somehow spent $200 million on this picture makes no damn sense at all. Because it is not a film that required to. I mean, I think about 80 million of that is three salaries, from what I read. It's the director fee and the two stars fees. Okay, now even this guy, is it really $120 million picture? It's basically soundstage material. It's all essentially, most of it, in sound stages.
Yeah, because the movie takes place in a prison and in a courtroom,
And
and
times.
yeah, and like once on the street when they blow up the courtroom and they're being dragged out of the street. It's like it didn't need to be $200 million, but I was just watching some of the extra features that came attached to the digital copy I purchased because it was still cheaper than getting a movie ticket. And like Todd Phillips said something like, when you make a sequel, the studio gave us this huge amount of money to make whatever we wanted, and we took that opportunity and we made it as fast as possible. In other words, they made it as fast before the studios said, "You did what to the Joker? You can't do that. How dare you?" And that's what I liked about the movie, is that it was really kind of like, it was a much more original vision than the first film was. Because the first film actually did have Scorsese attached to it, which is kind of ironic how Scorsese says, "Oh, Marvel films are like theme park rides." I'm like, yeah,
Comic
you
book
almost,
movies in general. He didn't
yeah,
discriminate. Yeah.
Yeah.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, he didn't say DC. If he said, but he said, but with DC, I almost made a movie with them. But instead, you could tell it's derivative of, Taxi Driver and King of Comedy, and then it's not a Scorsese film, but Death Wish. So that one didn't feel as original, but this one does. And when it does feel original, fans don't like it because this is a movie about Arthur Fleck. It's not a movie about the Joker. And people took that personally. But I mean, like, you could, but it's open for interpretation too. You could say, well, this movie is actually a film about what inspired the idea for the Joker. The first film did that, but here's like the real Joker, and he literally, quite literally, the guy who like kills Joker at the end of the film is literally like turning into Heath Ledger, which that was like it's funny that that's kind of been ubiquitous with Joker now because I don't think that was ever in the comics. Did he ever have his
Different
lips? Yeah,
different iterations, but
yeah.
they call that the Glasgow smile.
Ah, okay, okay.
I read somewhere that the script for the first Joker, in the scene where he's sort of kind of commanding the crowd after the riot, instead of drawing the Joker smile out, he originally was going to like carve it into his face, and that was the one thing the studio said too much,
Hmm.
can't do it.
Yeah,
And
and
then and so I like to think of the fact Joaquin Phoenix, I'm just imagining this. Joaquin Phoenix says, "Hey Todd, we should do the sequel, and I've got an idea. It'll be a musical." And I don't think Todd Phillips heard all of it. I think he just probably was listening to something in his head saying, "Well, now we're going to be able to get to do that ending that they wouldn't let us do the first time. Where somebody carves the Joker face, and it won't be the guy they expect." But so I mean, who knows? I'm a little cynical about a guy like Phillips, who made the Hangover movies. I mean, some movies I don't mind. I mean, Old School was the only one I could handle. I didn't mind before this one, but this one, there's something else going on. There's something about the first one has this sort of fake gravity, I think, and this one actually feels truly grave, like something is trying to be said, about the cost of turning of ionizing and valorizing these psychopaths. And I don't mean these psychopaths like these kids today. I mean like character like as they established in Arthur Fleck. But it's not like he's trying to turn this sort of dream version of Arthur Fleck into a truly dazzling song and dance man, whether he's doing a Sonny and Cher bit or whether he's doing whatever, some other kind of Broadway night, I think. Um, it's just that you have to kind of deal with that level of like desperately mediocre talent, and that's kind of his point. Now, Lady Gaga is a different story, and I do think that if we had two turns at the center of this movie that were sort of doing the same thing that Phoenix is doing, it would have been insufferable. In fact, Lady Gaga, pretty good.
Oh yeah, and the funny thing is, like they were talking about how they were singing the songs, and Lady Gaga said they like I intentionally sang, or they made me intentionally sing the notes off, which I thought that was maybe they did that because Joaquin Phoenix can't sing anymore because he's smoked like a million cigarettes without his life. I love how he cares about his health. He's like, I'm a vegetarian, but I'm gonna just smoke tons of tobacco. But no, I think they were meant to sing it off because something's like off about this musical, and I haven't seen a musical like this in a while. Like it's one where in the beginning I thought the music really worked well. You saw how it connects Phoenix to the outside world through another medium outside of comedy. And like I think like halfway through it was starting to feel like filler instead of music. Like for instance, there's a scene where Lady Gaga singing That's Entertainment and then they're intercutting it to the Joker on trial. And I'm going, well, this could have been cut and this could have been a little better. But the funniest thing is with this movie is that Todd Phillips keeps subverting expectations with this film. And I'm always wondering, was he subverting them just for the sake of subverting them? Or did he have like a real message he was trying to send to people?
Well, I think it's no secret that the message he was sending to people is that he hates the fans of the original Joker. But regardless of that, I think whatever of that angst he put into the movie, I think really works. And Michael, you said that you don't think that it improves the original film. I think it does, in that it makes the problems with the first film, just talking about the comic book universe in which it's set, it legitimizes it. Because one of the issues I took of it, I'm a Batman fan. I read comics and a fan of the movies and stuff. But watching this, I didn't see any of the Joker character. It was just a guy who dressed up in a kind of a wacky purple suit and painted a clown face on him, but there was nothing in it aside from those, again, shoehorned elements of like, oh, he stops by Wayne Manor and sees a young Bruce Wayne, and there's takes place in Gotham City. But other than that, you take those elements out, there's nothing Joker about this picture until the second film, which of course at the very end we meet what we can presume is going to be the real Joker or a more real iteration of that. And I think the cool thing is that the sequel takes the idea of this Arthur Fleck is not actually the Joker. He's caught up in a trash city. He begins leading this kind of revolution by accident, and he is crazy, but he's not a criminal killer the way that the actual Joker that we've known for decades in the other material is. And I think that leads into the story of, Harley Quinn in the comics and the animated series where she sprang from. She was a psychiatrist at Arkham Asylum who kind of fell in love with the Joker. In this movie, she is sort of an aristocratic, Upper East Side, chick who's studying psychology and kind of like goes and hangs out in the asylum for fun. And then she dumps Arthur Fleck when she realizes you're not the Joker. That's not you. And so in the courtroom scenes, particularly when he's putting on these affects, he's trying to convince himself and the rest of the world that he is this crazy, unpredictable person, but he starts to fall apart inside. And at the end, when he gets taken out by the real Joker, that is him relinquishing whatever claim to fame he had. And there's a new guy who's going to step into this mantle and he's going to carve that smile into his face and, become the true crown prince of crime. And I like that we've got the Harvey Dent sort of origin with, the blowing up the courthouse and he's destined to become Two-Face. It's subtle because you just barely see that nice camera work of the body in the courtroom is half of his face is in shadow, which is kind of nice. But also it leaves open the possibility that Harley Quinn dumped Arthur Fleck and then went back to her, condo or whatever. But there's nothing to say that she can't one day go to Arkham Asylum and end up treating the actual Joker, who is insane, probably is very charming, and will end up in that sort of abusive relationship where in Joker Folie Deux, she plays the role of the Joker in the traditional Joker Harley Quinn story. She's the big dog, she's the leader, and he's kind of the sycophant, like, I love you, please don't ever leave me, I need you, you're kind of my rock, even though you treat me like garbage. That's not going to happen because there's not going to be a Joker 3, but you can imagine casting that forward. She's going to wind up with the real Joker and the tables are going to be turned. And I like that because it's all there if you want to read it that way, but it's not hammering it home the way, again, the DC elements were kind of retrofitted into a non-Joker story in the first film.
I thought you were gonna say hammering it home like when he had the giant gavel and hammered it over the judge.
No, well, I thought it was interesting because I brought this up on the podcast that I did initially. That judge, John Smitrovich, Bill Smitrovich, yeah,
Yes.
Great character actor. But
Yeah.
in that movie, he looks like Martin Scorsese, and I'm just the glasses, the demeanor, and everything. And I'm wondering if this is some kind of a backhanded Phillips thing of like I'm gonna bash my former exec producer over the head.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I thought he looked like Scorsese and like Harry Carey.
Yeah.
Holy cow.
Yeah. I mean, I appreciate everything you said there about just like what the movie is subtly saying and not hitting us over the head with. I just think that, fans, what this really shows us is fans really don't know what they want. If we got more of the same in this movie with more of the same kind of Joker, of the previous movie, they complain that it's more of the same. But now we have something different and new, different when it comes to sequels, different, okay? And they're like, what the heck is this? And even Warner Brothers was like, what the heck is this? And I mean, gosh, Warner Brothers doing the same thing with like Burying Eastwood's new movie. It's like, what's going on?
Well,
I mean, honestly,
sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, like, it was brought up earlier that Phillips kind of keeping this from Warner Brothers and specifically James Gunn and his whole kind of, he's the head honcho over there
Sure.
for, their comics and entertainment movies, working on Superman, that whole new universe. He was kind of miffed that Phillips didn't share anything with him. And I can understand that because I wouldn't want anything from this movie to be tied into that thing, which we haven't even seen, what they're going to do it with. It just seemed like I'm mad at you because you wouldn't let us get our untested brand fingers into your creative vision. So, but sorry, go ahead, Michael.
I know it does. I'm going to check out. I'm going to check out the first Joker again at some point, just to see if the two movies do talk to each other in ways I didn't either want to acknowledge or didn't notice the first time. But it does make me wonder how, if that first film, with some of the connection points it does make to, the whole DC Comics Batman universe. I think that was just enough to put the harshest stuff in that movie over with the fans, and it made enough sense for a general audience that was there for this, what became pretty quickly known as like a performance you should see, whatever you think. That was the turning point. In a way, I think it didn't matter what kind of Joker movie outside, um, outside maybe basically more of the same that these guys delivered for the second one. Nobody was going to be in the mood to watch Phoenix do basically an equally committed version of this guy with even more of a pronounced weight loss. It's like, at some point, I don't want people to lose weight for a role anymore because I just get nervous. I just don't I don't like seeing, they need some carbs.
Just like
But
the back of his shoulder bone in that shot.
yeah, no, it's frightening. The second film isn't trying to just kind of make it endure some of his suffering. It's really more of a larger idea of like, I want, the movie's trying to make us rethink why the first one was a hit. And yes, it'll never happen again. A big studio will never throw $200 million at anybody who made $1.5 billion on the first one. They will not. It's the end. And actually, I do, considering how Warner Brothers pre-trashed and pre-buried a perfectly solid Eastwood film that was like courtroom drama. That honestly, courtroom drama is the hardiest, HARDIEST, hardiest genre out there. And it's the fact that this movie happened, I guess, in the first place at that budget, is a great indication of just in what kind of disarray Hollywood is right now. How the studio system is really mid-collapse as we speak.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I always wonder, why did Todd Phillips make a film that intentionally alienated the fans and did something where he knew he would piss off the studios? Because I saw it, I was like, that took courage, and I don't think a lot of other artists would have done that. They probably would have taken their paycheck and made just some movie that people wouldn't remember.
Well, I mean, it's interesting that you refer to Todd Phillips as an artist because I don't think before Joker anyone would have, given him that kind of an accolade. I mean, he's a filmmaker, so in that sense, he's an artist. But to Michael's point, he's made a lot of kind of juvenescent, gross out, adult comedies in the last, 20 years, 21 years.
Oh, yeah.
So to see him tackle this darker material, it's about a stand-up comic, so it's weird. It's like the twisted kind of funny, but it's also part social commentary, part horror movie. It's also interesting that as Michael brought up the fact that there are two Warner Brothers courtroom dramas, because that's essentially what the bulk of Folie Deux is, that are getting kind of buried by that studio. I don't know what that says about the state of things, but it's in terms of Phillips churning out this movie that everyone's going to hate, like, what does he have to lose? I mean, he's got the paycheck, he's got the residuals, I'm sure, from the first movie, so like, okay, do whatever you want. We're going to give you that control, which again, no filmmaker will probably ever have. They're going to want to keep tabs on what everyone's doing. A certain amount of control, I think, is always warranted, especially when you're playing with that kind of money and those kinds of resources and time. But yeah, I don't blame him for doing it, because obviously I'm a big fan of it. I never wanted to watch the first Joker again. I never wanted to think about it, and I certainly didn't want a sequel. I went to this movie grudgingly, and I came out just like on cloud nine, only to find that everybody, well, present company excluded, was just treating it like was the worst thing possible.
That's why I thought it'd be a kick to actually do this podcast. Record it. It's like, hey, this will be like in memoriam, and it's recorded, and here's 4 critics who actually like it. And Michael, you might be able to speak to this because maybe this is a question that is delving more into film history. But as I was watching this, I couldn't help but think, and maybe this is just me, but I know if I won an Oscar for a role, I wouldn't want to return to that role because it's like, hey man, it's one and done. I don't want to return to that role. I got the Oscar for it. Let's find something new. But we all know that there's a history of certain actors who've gone back to roles, sometimes repeatedly. Anthony Hopkins, Hannibal Lecter. Have you?
Sylvester
I mean,
Stallone.
have you ever seen a sequel where an actor who won an Oscar for Best Actor, Actress, who's come back to that role in a sequel, and the sequel's been good or different or new?
Did Pacino win for Godfather? I
The
don't think so.
first, no, he didn't
That's the
win.
second
That
one,
was
right?
De Niro and Brando.
Yeah. Oh, that Brando. I hope they have
I think
his
you're muted, Mike.
acceptance.
Michael.
Oh, am I?
No,
No,
Michael.
Michael.
I am his name.
Oh.
Sorry.
Oh, but no, I forgot what I was gonna say. Don't worry about
I know, like
it.
Hackman returned to French Connection.
Oh yeah,
Too,
yeah,
wasn't that great? I mean, gosh, even supporting roles. Hey, Don Amici returned to Cocoon: The Return. It's like that
Oh
wasn't
yeah.
very memorable. So it's like, what movie return, like a returning Oscar-winning actor, stands out?
Yeah, it is. It is. I think Phoenix is genuinely uh, unconventional and off-center enough just as a human being in the way he lands on projects. Doing the sequel the studio desperately wanted because of the billion plus the first one made. But I do believe it came to him one night in a dream and then he suddenly was on board. And I think we will never, just like Megalopolis in the same year, which was not, no studio is going to suffer, but we will never see the likes of this one again. We'll never see the likes of this again. Yeah,
Yeah.
Joker 2, you'll never see the likes of this.
Yeah. It'll be decades till we see anything like that where your studios or producers are gonna trust a director like that. And that's what made me love the movie is that this movie is basically a huge middle finger to comic book geeks, which here's the thing. I grew up on Batman. Like Batman was the movie that made me want to be a filmmaker. And then I saw Space Odyssey and my mind was blown. But that's like a whole other story. That's when I saw Space Odyssey, I realized movies weren't just like this thing with a story with a beginning, middle, and end. It's actually this whole other thing. But I feel like Todd Phillips and Joaquin Phoenix sort of shared the same feeling. Like, we're tired of all these franchise films. We're tired of seeing, big CGI stuff. We're tired of seeing people like doing something they're familiar with. Let's make something different. What can we make? So they made Folie Deux a musical, and I think a lot of fans didn't remember that it was going to be a musical because the trailers didn't show any of the musical numbers. So when the
Yeah.
music started showing up, people who weren't reading the headlines were probably going, why are they singing? What are they doing? Because like everyone says their favorite movie in the film is when Lady Gaga's on the steps and she starts singing, and then Joaquin Phoenix is putting his hands over his mouth and he's just saying, "Stop singing, just talk for a little bit." And that's sort of, I think, how where everyone lands. But I mean, it's nice to see a film that takes a big franchise and really takes enormous risks with it doing something. I mean, outside of just the ending, I mean, you're breaking down the idea of what makes a crazy person and do they always live with this euphoria that Joker does, or do they die living in regret for the actions that they've taken? And it's a film where I think the most interesting part is when Lee leaves the Joker, Lee Quinzel leaves the Joker, and it's because he's Arthur Fleck, and that's the audience leaving because that's what Phillips knew he was gonna do. And it's like, okay, you're all gonna feel like Lee at this point.
It is hilarious to see a movie that has this little interest in setting up a third, possible third.
Yeah,
Although
I mean,
I think Ian's scenario would hold. I like that.
yeah. I mean, we know it's never going to happen, but we could live on in that imagination.
yeah,
Well, and that's the frustrating thing about it is, the people who went to go see it, because I think the big problem is such a flop because nobody comparatively went to go see it, right? So I think the bad word of mouth, Warner Brothers shot themselves in the foot by not playing up the musical aspect of it. But I kind of also understand that because a lot of the music in this film is not highfalutin theatrical,
Mhm.
it's off key. It's not something you can put in a trailer and say, I have to go see that on the big screen. But the bad word of mouth, the early press, Todd Phillips coming out and essentially saying it's an FU to the fans of the first movie. I mean, what a horrible thing to say. Whether or not you think that of your audience, I mean, you were hired to do a job. Warner Brothers probably doesn't appreciate that, and who cares if what you think of them? They're still paying the money to see it. I think if you had gotten more people into the theater to see it, they could have possibly overridden some of that negativity and said, you know what, it's not strictly a musical. I mean, it does have a lot of musical numbers, but it's unconventional for the reasons that we've talked about here tonight. And so that's why I think, and Mike, you shared a couple of articles, I think, about there are people saying, in 10 years or 20 years, this thing is going to get reappraised and really appreciated because people just don't get it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
maybe.
Okay, you know what? Okay, here's one. Here's a historical throwback. It's Always Fair Weather, 1955. Gene Kelly, Sid Charisse. Have you seen that?
Oh,
No,
It's
but
a,
I will
it,
add it
it,
to my list.
well, it was a huge flop, and the movie is this kind of harsh, downbeat, strange satire of mid-50s consumer culture and the early Ad Men era or Mad Men era and Madison Avenue. Um, with three or four fantastic numbers. But I mean, people stared at that from 1955, and that was, and musicals were sort of on the fade. But that's kind of what's happening with these two, and I hadn't thought of that in terms of scale.
I was going to say, what would be interesting is, and this is just my fantasy scenario, where 10 years from now, there's sort of a midnight movie revival at places like the Music Box, where it's like,
Hmm.
hey, come see this notorious flop, and you get get a packed theater of people to actually pay to watch Joker Folie do and have them come out and say, no, this is really good. I mean,
Hmm.
this isn't
It,
the room, you know?
Yeah.
if only it had gotten an F cinema score rating. It got a,
Sure.
didn't, what did it get, a D minus or something, or
Yeah.
D's?
Yeah, it's great. I'm gonna start wrapping it up because we're at the 2 minute mark here. So if everyone could give like a final rating to Joker Folie à Deux, what would it be? It would be out of four Guinnesses, so 1 through 4, and you can add the halves.
I'll go 3.5.
Wow. Okay.
Solid three Guinness.
Yeah.
I went three for the Tribune. Yeah, I go 3 out of 4. The three means good, and it's good in ways that nobody anticipated.
Yeah, I gave it a 3 out of 4. Like, I didn't love it. I felt like some of the music dragged on a bit, but overall, it's a vision you don't get from filmmakers anymore with a popular property. And I will bounce back and say, like, Todd Phillips, like, yes, he did direct the Hangover movies and Old School, but comedy is like the hardest category to do
Yeah.
because if your audience isn't laughing within the first 10 minutes, or if there's just like a gap of the film with this hour 30, hour 40-minute time mark, you're gonna lose people. So
Yeah.
that's hard to keep going with. And he was able to do that with, I don't think he should have made sequels to Hangover, but whatever, but he was able to do that and he was able to do drama. So yeah, it was a good movie. Like some of the musical scenes could have been cut, but it had just some incredible performances in there. And it's a movie that you'll see it and you'll either hate it or you'll love it. And that's what good art does. It actually incites a reaction out of you. But having wrapped this up, I would like to thank David J. Fowley from Keeping It Real, Ian Simmons from Kicking the Seat, and Michael Phillips from the Chicago Tribune. And I'm Mike Crowley. I'm from You'll Probably Agree, which is YPAReviews.com. The YPA stands for, as you guessed it, Probably Agree. You can find me on Twitter, TikTok, and Facebook under YPA Reviews. Okay, folks, thanks a lot.